As you know, I always sign off my shows. Knowledge is power. In this industry, you have to be a constant learner. One of the areas that seems to generate the most interest is project management. So today, we're going to talk about BICSI's project management course.
Don't hang up that phone. We've found what you're looking for. Welcome to the Let's Talk Cabling Podcast with Chuck Bowser, RCDD. What exactly does RCDD stand for? Registered Communications Distribution Designer. Just the expert you need to ensure your cable plant performs exactly as designed. Now, send the new guy to the truck for a bucket of dial tone and the cable stretchers, while you listen to an informative program on telecommunications.
Welcome to the show where we tackle the tough questions submitted by installers, project managers, engineers, customers. We're connecting at the human level so that we can connect the world. If you're watching this show on YouTube, would you mind hitting the subscribe button and the bell button to be notified when new content is being produced? If you're listening on one of the podcast platforms, would you mind giving us a 5-star rating? Those two little steps helps us break the algorithm so we can get this message out to more people in the ICT industry to educate, encourage, and enrich the lives of everybody in our industry. Thursday nights, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, live stream, where you get to ask your favorite RCDD questions. That would be me. It's broadcast on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. But remember, there's no live streams until after January 2022. So as I mentioned, you got to be a constant learner in this industry. And one of the premier education platforms that we have available to us is BICSI, and they have a really good project management class. Now, this episode is actually generated by you, the audience, because I got so many questions about the project management course, I had to invite BICSI on and have them come talk about their class. So I brought back to the show another guest who's been here before, Christopher Hobbs from BICSI. Chris, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Chuck, for having me back.
My pleasure. It's always a pleasure to have you guys on board. So you guys have a project management course. So you changed the numbering on it. So it's PM102, I think now, if I remember right.
That is correct. The online course that we have that is self-paced is the PM101. That's a very basic introduction to project management. And then we have a 5-day course that is the PM102, which really covers in depth more project management topics.
Gotcha. I didn't realize the PM101 was a self-taught or self-paced course. So is that a prerequisite for the 102?
It is not. So the PM102 class is designed for entry-level technicians that have moved into a project management role, or even experienced project managers that have really had no formal project management training.
So in that PM102, I want to focus mostly on the PM102 course because that's where I seem to get most of those questions. So in that PM102 course, what skills does that class teach to help make a project manager increase their success?
That's a great question. So the biggest skill we teach is to how to formally manage a project. So breaking that down, our instructors will explain the importance of a project charter, which is something that I have found to be extremely lacking in the ICT project management world. We will explain why it's important to have a risk management plan and how to understand the effects stakeholders can have on a project, both in positive and negative impacts. In the class, we'll have the students create a network diagram to understand project flow and identify key tasks that must be completed on time. And that's always a big confusion. People think network diagrams and they think of computer networks, but this is actually how the project is actually networked together, each of the individual tasks and how they're networked together. In planning for project budgets, we cover earned value management and its role in ensuring projects get completed at or under budget. And as we all know, customers change their minds during projects. So having a good change management plan is vital to ensure that we don't have budget overruns or unrealized opportunities on the project. And then lastly, and perhaps just as important as kicking a project off with a project charter, is how to properly close a project.
Those are all the weak areas. I'm glad you guys are hitting those. Project closure is probably one of the big ones. Before I get to that one, you said something earlier, and I agree 110%. Our industry is really not good at creating project managers, right? Generally what we'll do is we'll take somebody in the field, like a lead tech or a project foreman who's really good at what they do, and then we throw them in a project management role. And while some succeed, like some of the things that you just mentioned, they haven't really been educated on or taught. It's a different mindset because you got to think about anytime a customer asks you something, the number one question that's got to go through your head is, how does this impact my job? Does it impact the schedule? Does it impact the manpower? Does it impact the cost? Right. So I was glad to hear that. So I'm assuming there's some kind of aids in the program, like forms and stuff like that.
There
What
are.
is it in there that they can have as a takeaway?
So the VCT class, which is our virtual classroom training, offers many documents and templates that'll give the project manager a great starting toolbox for managing their projects. And they actually use many of those tools in the class to develop a project plan for a simulated project. The in-person class, they have access to all those online tools and they can be downloaded and used for future projects if they need.
Oh, very cool. Who would you say is the ideal candidate for that PM102 course?
Honestly, anyone who's transitioning, as you said, from the field as a technician or lead into project management, or even a person who's been a project manager but has had no formal training. I've had plenty of PMPs who've sat in the class and said they got more out of the PM102 class than they did from any PMP test prep class, primarily because we explain why we use the tools and techniques in the class and when it would be appropriate to use those tools and techniques instead of saying, well, you have to use all of them.
One of the things I say kind of often, and maybe you can confirm, deny, or educate me, because I get asked that, what's the difference between the PMP and the RTPM, right? And I tell them they're similar, but the project management class that's offered by BICSI is like, it's fine tuned for our industry. It's project management. You get the same foundational stuff that you get in the PMP course, but it's fine tuned for our industry because not everything goes across industries project management wise.
That would be correct. If you look at the PMP, which is a great credential, without a doubt, but it's PMP is a project management generalist. They're designed so they can manage any project across any sector, whereas the BICSI ICT RTPM, the Registered Telecommunications Project Manager credential, is designed specifically for our industry, and we cover those things that are really required and needed for our industry and the things that have the importance for our industry and for the people that are working projects in the ICT industry. So that's really what the key difference is between the two of them.
Now, as you know, we're in the COVID times. It's causing people to think outside the box, especially when it comes to training, right? So what are the delivery options? Because you mentioned the 5-day course. What are some of the delivery options for that PM102 course?
So we have two delivery options. The primary mode of delivery right now is through virtual classroom training, which is an online instructor-led class. It is 5 days. However, prior to the winter conference, we are offering a face-to-face class, the first one we've had since all this COVID stuff started. Now, that's granted if things don't change, as you know, with COVID and with new variants that are coming out, that may get changed and moved to virtual, but we are offering that at the conference Tuesday, January 25th to Saturday, January 29th. Tuesday through Saturday, so those people who wish to attend the conference can attend. And as of right now, I am the instructor for that class.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. The if somebody wants to take that RTPM exam, is this a good class for them to take before the class or before the exam?
So this is not a test prep class. However, everything we cover in the class has the potential to be on the test. The class is designed to make a person a better project manager. As with all of our exams, self-study is going to be important. The RTPM Certification Handbook suggests 125 or more hours of study, and the exam blueprint outlines the exam content and is also found in the RTPM Certification Handbook, which you can find on our website.
So I'm going to throw a curveball at you. Okay. This wasn't one of the questions, but I have a feeling you can answer pretty easily. So another question I get quite often is from field people, who, technicians, foremen, stuff like that, and they're looking for that next step, right? They want to get out of the field, whatever. And I get asked all the time, Chuck, which way should I go? My RCDD or should I go towards my project management certification? How would you answer that question?
Well, we get that question a lot at BICSI as well. And really the first thing I always ask, where are you going now? What are you doing? Because there's not one answer that fits all. If you work for an organization that does a lot of design work and that's something that you want to move into, then the RCDD makes a lot of sense. However, what I have found, especially from my career, is that the most logical step for an individual is to go from a technician in the field, which is what I did, move into project management. And then once you're in project management, you'll find that you're doing a lot of design work because the customer's requirements are not as up to snuff as they should be. So as you're doing all the design work, you build up that design background and the information that you need and your experience so that you can actually sit for the RCDD exam. Because a lot of times that individuals that are coming from the field, they don't have that requirement met for the years of design experience. But being a project manager for several years will allow you to build that experience up.
And that's exactly how I answer. The first question I usually do is when they ask me that, I come right back with them. Where do you want to go? Are you leaning more towards being an estimator or somebody who designs? Are you looking more towards, like running the actual projects themselves? And then based on how they respond to that, I'll tell them, here's what I think you should get both. I think you should at some point before you get too far along in your career, you should have both. But not everybody can go out and. Although I do know one person who's studying for their RCD exam and their DC thing at the same time.
Oh, that I could not keep that straight in my head. There's no way.
Yeah,
I have
yes.
both those credentials, and there's no way I could keep that information straight in my head at the same time.
Yeah,
That's
she was in my
pretty bold.
yeah, she was in my TDM study group that I did earlier this year, and just amazing person, and it kind of changed my view on the younger generation because I'm your typical old person. You young whippersnappers don't know anything, or you believe the hype that you hear on the news, right? The Gen X's and all the others, they say how they're late. I'm telling you, I'm inspired by the new people coming in our industry. I truly am. So let's talk about that RTPM exam. What's the process to sit for that exam?
Sure. So to actually sit for the exam, anyone that wishes to apply for it, they need to go to our website, www.bicsi.org, and select Education Certification from the menu bar, and then select on the Registered Telecommunications Project Manager. And then on the right side of the screen, they're going to see that RTPM Certification Handbook, and it's going to have answers to every question a future RTPM would need. And as far as applying, there's a link on the same page where they'll go and they'll complete an online application.
Sounds very similar to the RCDD one.
Very similar in the process, yes. Matter of fact, if you go look at all of our exams now, they're all laid out with a very similar process. All of the certification pages look very similar. Every credential has a certification handbook that's associated with it that answers almost all of the questions that you could potentially have.
I got to imagine that you get hit with the same questions over and over and over again.
Quite often, yes.
Yep. Yeah. I do have another question. So when they fill out that application, and this probably bears more towards the RCDD one than it does the RTPM, where you fill out your design experience and stuff. Do you guys actually follow up on that experience and those references?
They do. They do follow up on those references and all. Now, that may not be every person. They get so many applications in, but they do follow up and ask. I know when I went through my process years ago, they followed up and asked my references because I had an individual that was out of the country at the time and wasn't responding to their email, so they were going to deny my application. So I actually called his wife and asked when he was going to be back in. It was a friendly person that I knew, and she said that he'd be back on Wednesday, but it'd be following that Friday he was leaving back out of the country again. I said, okay, I need him to call me as soon as he gets back in. And of course he did, and he sent a response back, and he apologized, said, things have been crazy. And I said, man, I understand, no worries. It's just I was scrambling, gonna find somebody else to write another letter for me.
Right. I found that in dealing with BICSI, that they will bend over backwards to help you to work whatever challenge you have. If you run into a situation, just like you said, and you tell them, look, here's my reference, but he's in and out of the country, I found that they will bend over backwards to help you for that. They really will. That RTPM exam, how many questions are on that exam?
So there are 100 questions on the exam, and you've got a 2-hour time limit to take those 100 questions.
Very cool. And I'm assuming you do that with Pearson View?
That is correct. All of our written exams are through Pearson View. So when you fill out your exam application, you'll need to schedule your exam when you wish to take it after you've been approved. You'll get all that information in an email sent to you.
Now, I know you and I talked about the Pearson View on the last interview. I got to imagine that helps keeps the integrity of the exam process better than relying on 300 proctors across the country.
It does. You think about it also, as we're a global organization, it opens up those opportunities for exam sessions to be held anywhere. And that's really what's important as we move more towards an open and global society in general. having access to those exams, whether you're in Cameroon or whether you're in India or whether you're in China or whether you're in Japan or wherever the case may be, Brazil, those opportunities to take the exams are now open to you. Whereas if we were using the old proctor system, or you have to go someplace to take the exam, it really limits the ability to do that.
Is the exam written in multiple languages?
It's only in English.
Okay. Is there plans on making it available in other languages, or that just hasn't something that BICSI's thought about yet?
Chuck, I don't know the answer to that. I know that for the RCDD, I believe that there are multiple languages for that. Which languages that there are, I don't know. I speak English and bad English and really bad Spanish, and that's about the only languages that I speak. So,
I tell people I speak English and acronyms. Those are the only two languages I know.
Well, you're not in industry until you have acronyms and vocabulary no one outside your industry knows.
Exactly.
That makes it a profession then.
Exactly. So, you mentioned so the RTPM certification. How's it going to be beneficial to a project manager? So once they get that certification, what do they get out of that when they show that to a potential employer?
So that's a great question, and there are several ways it'll help. The first is that the RTPM credential demonstrates that the individual has a competent level of ICT project management knowledge. And this will allow the individual to show potential employers or customers that they understand the tools and techniques to effectively manage projects. The next advantage is where bids or tenders require a certified project manager. Many times they'll list a PMP. However, personally, I have never had a customer not take the RTPM in lieu of a PMP once it was explained what the RTPM was. And lastly, as with all credentials, it helps with your career advancement. I've never had one of my credentials not pay me back in time and money at least 100-fold.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. My only, and I think I've told you this last time we talked, my only thing that I'm really sad about is I waited so long to get my certifications. I wish I'd have gotten them earlier in my career.
I completely agree.
Yeah. So you mentioned the PMP. Could somebody use the RTPM as a stepping stone towards their PMP?
So according to PMI, the PMP requires 35 hours of project management education / training. And the BICSI PM102 class is a 35-hour class, 35 hours of content and seat time.
So that would help them for as far as fulfilling that those hourly requirements. You said yes. It's like the PMP is a general kind of certification. So there's going to be some layers. I'd have to think there'd be some information that they get in the RTPM class. But if I was a hiring manager and I had somebody who had a PMP and somebody in RTPM and everything else was identical in their background, I would probably be leaning towards the RTPM certification because it's fine-tuned to our industry.
Yeah, I would as well. I mean, if I'm looking, all things being considered, experience and background and everything else, I would definitely lean more heavily to the RTPM over a PMP. I mean, you're looking at an individual who holds a credential that is for our ICT industry.
Right. Yeah, project management it's managing widgets, right? It doesn't matter if those widgets are car parts, tractor parts, or the ICT industry. And so when you talk about certification that deals specifically with our industry, that gives somebody a leg up, I would think.
It does. And you look at people that are transitioning in our industry, if they go and project management's a career. I mean, it is a career, just like designers are careers or engineers are careers or being a technician in the field is a career. And when you look at a career, it's terminology and things that people may not understand. But because this is ICT project management, it's an easier transition into this career than it would be if they picked up the PMBOK or some of the other project management credentials that are out there and they looked at it, their minds are going to explode because they're going to have no idea what any of that means. It would be as if a project manager from other industry picked up the TDMMs and they tried to read them. They're going to have no idea what any of that means in there because they're from outside of the industry. So that's one of the advantages of the RTPM. It's an easier transition for those individuals.
So you taught this course many times. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize.
That's okay.
So you've taught the course a couple times, somewhere between 1 and 100 or 1,000. What part of the class do you find that students struggle with the most?
So I think probably the part that they struggle with the most is network diagrams. understanding how projects are laid out, and then once the light bulb goes off, which for me is an amazing part. I like teaching the online version, and I like teaching the in-person version. They both have their advantages. For me, the network diagrams is probably easier to teach online because they can do some things with the tools that we give them. But when they're in person, we use sticky notes and we put them on a whiteboard or on a wall, and they have to take all of their tasks and they have to lay them out from start to finish, and then they have to go through and they have to calculate their critical path. And I was teaching at a facility several years ago. This would be 7 years ago. I was teaching at a facility, and a gentleman says, I know exactly what task I need to pay attention to on my projects. And these individuals had brought projects to work on instead of the BICSI project. Said, okay, well, let's see. You mark on here what you think the tasks are that need to be focused on. You guys lay out your network diagram and let's see if you're right. Yeah, he was not. So, I mean, it was just a good example. And that right there, the light bulb went off. And one of his teammates said, well, that's why your projects are always late. I said, well, it could be, one of the reasons why his projects are always late. And those are just some of the great tools that we have in that class, is being able to see what trees in the forest we really need to focus on so that our projects get done on time and at or under our budget, and they meet the customer expectations.
Yep, I agree 100%. I used to teach project manager class when I used to work for a contractor many years ago, and that was I would say that was number 2 that I found. The biggest one I found was the earned value analysis, right? Because most project managers, when you ask them, is your project on time? Is it on budget? It'll say yes or no. Then you ask them, how do you know that? Show me how you came to that decision. Right, because you can take one item and say, okay, it's going to take me 100 man hours to do it. Well, one person can do it in 100 hours, but 100 people can't do it in 1 hour.
That's correct. That's earned value management. That is probably my favorite topic to teach in the class by far. It's one near and dear to my heart. I actually teach an advanced earned value management class for BICSI. It's a 6-hour class. We break over 3 weeks, 2 hours a week. I do that a couple times a year. I teach that course, and earned value management for me in the class is something that the students get just because of the way we teach it. Now, if you go to other organizations and you look at the way they teach it, they teach you a whole bunch of formulas, but they don't tell you why.
Right.
Why do you need this formula? What is this formula good for? And the other thing is, if you look at EVM at a core, the earned value is a percentage, a percentage of what your plan value is. And the problem that most organizations have is they don't tie that to an actual number that they can get done. The number of cables that are pulled, right, the number of cables that are terminated, the number of cables that are tested, however it's broken up, but an actual, non-subjective number that they can actually tie back to work that's being done. And if you do that, I mean, I managed all my projects with EVM. And it's such a superior way of managing projects. And then when you get in trouble and your project's not doing well, and the boss says, well, how much do we have to spend on this project to get it done? You have a way of giving them a number that's not throwing a number at a dartboard. And you've got something based on evidence.
Yeah, and you can back that number up. Yeah, because when it comes to the estimation of project management, and I'm gonna probably blow some minds of some people out there, you could actually go over in your hours, but still be under on your budget. Mm-hmm. It all depends on the crew makeup. What was the crew makeup during the estimation process, and who was the actual people assigned to that project, which your average crew the crew rate might be lower than it was what you estimated because the people you wanted on the project weren't available. And right. EVM will help you identify that and help identify that hopefully potential surplus, because another area that's really hard for people to understand is when it comes between the communication between the project manager and the staff in the field, right? When you talk to the technician, you need to make that goal as clear and as simple as possible, right? You need to say, you need to get X amount of cables terminated a day. If you do but more than, we're doing good. And I've learned that, from project managing jobs, if you can make it visually, it makes it even better. So I used to put a whiteboard on my trailer wall, and I would have pie charts and scales, and they could literally walk in and in an instant know, okay, we're doing really good, or we're right on target, or mm-hmm. something's wrong. Because if you hand them, a bunch of calculations done in a spreadsheet, unfortunately, some technicians in our field just aren't really good with spreadsheets.
No, No, the easiest way to do it is take your work breakdown structure and tell them how many need to be done. And then they report to you at the end of the week, the WBS number and the number of items completed. And then you can, if you have your EVM sheet set up properly, you can just punch those numbers in and you got an easily reporting process that can be created and given to upper management so that people know where you are with your projects and the customer as well.
Yep. I used to tell my guys all the time, here's our goal. Here's our weekly goal. Here's your daily goal. Here's our weekly goal. If you make the weekly goal, I'll buy everybody pizza at the end of the week. Because my goal was always, that number minus 5-10% to give me a little bit of leeway in case we had some issues. So if they hit that number, I knew it was ahead of the schedule. So that pizza for everybody.
Right.
You can motivate a technician with food, trust me.
Oh yes. Food works well.
Yes, it does. So anything of new news coming on at BICSI?
Really, the only new thing is we have a new ITSM that is going to be coming out for the installers next year, released around the winter conference at this point. And then we've got our new installation program that's going to come out probably closer to the middle of the year, maybe sooner. And that'll be the new ones. Maybe we can, when that gets released, maybe we come back on. I'll give you some news about that, some details.
Yeah, you have an open invitation. Come on anytime. I'm glad you said that about the ITSM because I was just about ready to buy one. Well, I'm gonna wait for the new one now.
Yeah, it's a couple months out and it'll be released.
Very cool. You getting excited about the winter conference?
I am. I'm going to be. It's going to be in person, at least as of now. It's going to be a hybrid. There'll be an in-person and online version, but I will be teaching the PM class the week before the conference there in Orlando, and then I will be at the conference as well.
I'm going to try to come over a couple, 2-3 nights for the exhibit halls because I always love going through the exhibit halls and seeing all the new stuff. That's always been my favorite part. I was that geek who, whenever they went to the winter conference, I attended every training session and I went to the exhibit hall. I didn't go out golfing and doing all the other stuff. I was there to learn. I love doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that was me. I enjoy seeing what new products are released. And, the other thing is you get a chance to talk to a lot of the product managers and they take a lot of that feedback back to their organizations because I know of one incident where a manufacturer took information I gave them and about 6 months later, I received a part from them and said, hey, here's your idea. Is this what you guys were looking for? And man, this is perfect. It saved us from having to fabricate something that we were doing with one of their products. So they do listen. It's a great place to go walk around, see the exhibitors, and then the education sessions, especially the last 4 or 5 years, have been excellent. They're just getting better every year.
Yep. And I kind of hope that you guys keep the virtual option there. I don't know if you guys have discussed it internally or not. And I'll tell you why. Because when you guys did the first virtual class, I got to admit, I was like, the conference virtually? Come on, that's going to suck. But I found that there are a lot of great benefits to having it virtually because when you go to the in-person conference, they have multiple sessions going on. I found myself quite often wanting to be at both of them, but I can't be at both of them. Right?
Oh, that would always happen to me. There'd always be 2 sessions, no matter what conference I would go to. There would always be at least 2 sessions that would be concurrent, and I would not be able to go to both of them.
Yep.
So yeah, the virtual option is nice that you can go back and you can actually watch all the sessions.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of good content. I mean, I picked up something for a data center class watching one. I said, wow, that's actually some pretty good information. I'll hold on to that for when I do another data center class, and used it in that class. The students used it. Yep. It was good information to have.
I think that is it 30 days that they keep the content available for the virtual. I think it's 30, isn't it?
I believe so. I believe it's 30 days, correct?
Yeah. So I kind of hope you guys continue doing. I know you're probably getting a lot of feedback. Stop the virtual. It's about face-to-face meetings and stuff. But you know what? It's not. I found that our industry is changing, and it's changing because we're finally starting to get an influx of newer people come in, and they do things differently, and some old people like me will say, that's not the way you do this. But when you stop and think and you think about it with an open mind, it's like they're coming up with some pretty good ideas and they like doing things virtually. They really like doing things virtually.
They do. I mean, our virtual classes have been very, very popular. A lot of people attend those and they have a lot of benefits. You don't have to travel. You don't have to go anywhere. But the other thing is you get the tools and everything during a class that you can use and actually see how they work. It is different. I'm like you. I'm old school. I think I made the transition to virtual classes pretty easily when I was, as I teach them every so often. But I still like face to face. There's advantages to both, and it really just depends on your class makeup and the individuals that are in them. The younger people that come into the classes, they do great with it. the older students, as long as you got an open mind, and that's always a requirement for any class, is you got to walk in with an open mind. You do that, then you're going to have a good time. You're going to learn quite a bit, and you'll feel like you're drinking from a fire hose. I know that every class I've ever attended has been like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know as teaching them, it's the same way. It feels like you've got a fire hose up there, and everybody's got their mouth open, and you're trying to pour as much in as you can. But it is really just depends on the student.
Yeah. And another benefit of the virtual class is it opens up that class to people who normally would not be able to take that class. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of people who want to learn, they want to take a class, but maybe they got a 6-month-old baby at the house and they can't, they can't leave. They can't go to Tampa. They can't go to Orlando to go take a week class. I mean, this opens up that opportunity for them. And one other thing too about classes you mentioned, let me know if you do this. So whenever I sit in a class now, obviously I'm there to learn, and you're right. You hit the nail on. You got to have an open mind. But I'm actually taking 2 classes. I'm taking the class for the curriculum, and I'm also watching the instructor. And I'm watching, what does that instructor do that I can do as well to become a better instructor myself? So it's like taking 2 classes.
Always. Well, we when you go through our train the trainer program to become an instructor, I think that kind of ingrains into you watching other instructors to see how they do things. And if you've got really good instructors that you really like to watch, I mean, we have a lot of the training delivery specialists that work for BICSI. When I'm in the office, I love walking over and sitting in their class and just watching them because they're so good at the craft. And if you've got a really good instructor or a really good presenter, it makes it enjoyable just to watch them present. It doesn't matter what they're presenting. It could be anything. They could be talking about butterflies migrating. And if they're a great instructor or presenter, it makes it that much more enjoyable to watch. But yes, I watch what the instructors are doing to see, well, that's something good. I like what they did. I can use that or that skill or that technique in the classes that I facilitate, or I didn't quite like the way they did that, or I could have done that better or differently.
Oh, I don't want to show you. Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, the old BICSI hard hat stickers.
Well, I don't wear a hard hat too often anymore. Although I'd love to. Whoop, it didn't fall down. Oh, well. I would love to, but yeah, technicians love those hard hat stickers. They really, really do. So, Chris, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to come on the show and talk about this class. And you always have an open invitation to come back.
I appreciate it, Chuck, and thanks for having me. It's always enjoyable to sit down and spend a couple minutes talking to you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Till next time, everybody, remember, knowledge is power.
That's it for this episode of today's podcast. We hope you were able to learn something. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. Also, leave a rating so we can help even more people learn about telecommunications. Until next time, be safe.